The next section of our study is what we call non-Christian religions. Now, if you were to study this course in a state university, for example, you probably would not find it called non-Christian religions. It would be called comparative religions or world religions because they would study Christianity side by side with other religions and be very careful not to exalt one religion above another. Obviously, our purpose for studying these religions is different. We compare everything that we find in the religions we study with the ultimate measure of God's Word. So we compare them to Christianity. And therefore, we entitle our course Non-Christian Religions. Now, let me just say a word here at the beginning that I hope will be helpful to you. Studying other religions of the world, for most of us, will make us at best kindergartners in our understanding of these belief systems. And I'm not trying to demean anybody by saying that, but just imagine for a moment that if someone from a Buddhist culture who knew nothing or very little about Christianity were to take a course in comparative religions, and among those would be studying Christianity, maybe a few class sessions or a week, or whatever, you can appreciate the very limited amount of material that person would have to go on after just a few sessions. That's kind of what we're up against here. Some of the religions that we look at in our non-Christian religions course are religions about which Americans know very, very little. And as a result, we can only give the very, very basics of these religions and their ideas, their beliefs in a course like this. So I want to encourage you to be very humble in your estimation of how much you believe that you know about these religions. We're only scratching the surface as we encounter them. Now, the very first one we're going to talk about is one that some students of culture would not even consider to be a religion, and that is what we call animism. Animism comes from a Latin word which means spirit or life, and it's the idea that spirit life of some sort can be found in everything, in people, in objects of nature, in the air itself, and so on. And so that's where we get the word animism. Some people believe that animism is not a legitimate religion because it's very difficult to locate a specific belief system. Most of the religions we study come with some sort of scripture or revelation or documentation by the founders that help us to understand exactly what they believe about things. But animism does not provide us with that kind of a collection of doctrines, if you will. And so some believe that it just kind of attaches itself to other religious systems. There is a certain extent to which that is true. But I do believe that even though we don't have volumes of doctrinal discussions about animistic beliefs, there is enough out there to, I think, legitimize understanding animism as a religious system. Okay. Now, when we use the word indigenous religions, we're talking about religions that are of the soil. That's what the word indigenous means. It means of the land, of the ground. And it has to do with those who are the original inhabitants of a particular location. And so animism normally refers to the religious system that was used in a particular location since the beginning of humanity, at least as we know it, the history that we have available to us. And so there are lots of variations among animists as we work through the concept of animism. It's good for us to ask a question about the development of religion, because since animism deals with the most primitive, if you will, the oldest of religious systems in a particular location, the question naturally arises, where did religion come from? Well, there are two theories we're going to look at. The first one is an evolutionary theory. It says that in the beginning, millions of years ago, everything was a god of some sort, and it was very rudimentary, And then over time, man began to shed some of those gods, and he still maintained a large number of deities, and that's where we get the word polytheism from, many gods. And then as time continued to progress, humanity began more and more to eliminate other gods from its collection. And eventually, most religions narrow theirs down to one main God. And that's where we get the word monotheism, or one God. And then, if you carry it to its ultimate conclusion, there comes a time when humanity evolves to the point where it no longer needs the crutch of religion, it no longer needs the help of deity. Man can stand on his own 2 feet and be what he wants to be. Now, again, that is an evolutionary approach to religious development. The biblical worldview demands a very different explanation. And so the second theory, which I hold, I believe the Bible teaches, is that God created the world and mankind with a monotheistic worldview. Adam and Eve recognized one God. Now that eventually changed, and man began to embrace other gods and became polytheistic. And eventually, yes, animism did come to characterize, atheism came to characterize certain people groups and cultures. So it's a very complex system, but I'm giving you a very simplistic contrast in the way that people view the development of religious systems. Some characteristics of animism that are good to remember are spirit guidance that comes through magic and sacrifice, etc. A quote that comes from the textbook that I use in non-Christian religions class says, many non-Western cultures are quite colorful because of the public nature of their religious practices. In animistic cultures, objects, animals, plants can all contain spirit beings of some sort, possess some sort of spiritual life. And therefore, to expose those and make them obvious is a way of exposing those deities. And that's one of the reasons why in some of these cultures, people are very colorful. That's not the only reason. There's also a focus on the temporal rather than the eternal. In animistic cultures, people are not as interested in knowing about the ultimate nature of God and where we're going to spend eternity and those types of questions. They want to know where they're going to get their next meal, or what kind of job they're going to get, or whether this sickness is going to kill them, or who they're going to marry, that sort of thing. And so most of the consultation of spirits, ancestors in an animistic culture are designed to help us answer practical questions that have to do with this life we're living now, and is not so concerned about the life hereafter or ultimate questions of spirituality. Number 3, organic methods are commonly used in animism. Oaths, curses, prophecies, necromancy, which is consultation of the dead, dreams, visions, trances, and spirit possession. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. Doesn't the Bible teach oaths? Doesn't the Bible talk about the people of God taking oaths? And yes, it does. Okay. The fact that animism uses oaths doesn't make it wrong in every situation. What happens is that Satan hijacks something that perhaps God himself has even ordained and uses it for wrong purposes. Same thing is true of dreams and visions. In the book of Acts, in the early church, the apostles experienced this sort of thing. And even some who were non-apostles had dreams and experienced visions. Paul said he had a trance when he was in the temple in Jerusalem shortly after he became a Christian. But animism, under the direction of the enemy of our souls, Satan, hijacks those ideas and uses them to deceive people and lead them in the wrong direction. Okay? But those kinds of things are obvious in the animistic world. Mechanical methods, divination, astrology, cheiromancy, ordeals, and omens. Cheiromancy has to do with taking oaths or casting lots and things like that. And again, these are all methods that are used in animism in order to discern the mind of the spirits or the will of an ancestor or something of that nature. All right. And then, as I mentioned previously, there's a lack of textual formality. In other words, it's hard to find documentation saying these are the main tenets or doctrines of animism. However, as I also mentioned, I do believe that we can identify them, and some of them we've seen right here. Now, I'm going to show you a few slides here just to kind of give you a feeling for what types of things you might notice if you're in an animistic culture. I do not know what this idol is here for, what the specific purpose of placing this idol in this location was, but I can tell you a couple of things. Number one, it's probably believed to possess spiritual power of some sort, and it's probably used to protect or to bless whoever it was that put it there, perhaps to chase away evil spirits or perhaps to attract good spirits. This is very common. And this type of thing can be found all over the animistic world. The Apostle Paul made it clear in Romans chapter 1 that man exchanged the truth of God and the character and reality of God for created things made of gold and silver and stones and wood and things like that. Another common practice in animism is actually to assume the spirit of an animal or a bird or something like that. And so someone who is dressed up to look like a particular animal or bird is probably doing so because he believes that that's part of the process of actually imbibing that the spirit of that animal, and in so doing, being able to act or perform certain things using the characteristics that that animal possessed. Okay, so again, the relationship, the interaction between the human world and the animal or plant world is very common. This is probably a mask that would be worn during a dance to scare off evil spirits, or perhaps in pronouncing a curse or something like that. Again, any number of possibilities exist. What you're looking at here is a type of entrance for certain spirits to come from the outside and come into the place where you are physically present. You see, in animism, a person doesn't die and then go to heaven or hell. A person dies, according to animistic teaching, and is buried, but the spirit of that person continues to inhabit in the same region, okay, but in a different form. So ancestors who pass away continue to exist and even interact with people, although they are invisible in spiritual nature. And so a circle like this can be used to attract certain spirits of ancestors or good spirits into the area where you're living. And the trinkets that are hung on a circle like that can be used to attract specific kinds of spirits. Okay, very interesting. Tarot cards you've probably heard of are used to determine the will of the spirits about something, direction in life, that sort of thing. Palm reading can be used in the same way by measuring the length and shape of the wrinkles in your hand and wrist. Certain things about you are said to be revealed. Tea leaf reading, involving putting tea leaves in tea and then allowing the tea to dry, and wherever the leaves settle, determine certain messages that reveal things about your life. Again, all of these are manipulations of Satan. When we talk about good and evil spirits, in animism, we understand as Christians that all of these spirits are demons, and they may come across as angels of light or very good, but we know that this is really a method that Satan uses to substitute the truth. The way a feather falls or lands on something, or the color of a feather that may land near you can say something about your future. Cowrie shells have also been used. I've put a few URLs in some of these pictures. You can go online and find a lot of information about this. Of course, the horoscope, fascinating study. I've given you the titles of a couple of books the gospel and the stars and the witness of the stars. And I'm not going to take a position on this here, but I'm just going to tell you that there are some evangelical authors who believe that God's original intent with the constellations was to reveal the message of the gospel, but then Satan hijacked that and turned it into what we know as astrology today and corrupted it. Whether that's the case or not, I'll leave up to you, but there are some interesting books and articles that discuss that. And then, of course, comets, the way that comets fall, the time of year, how big they are, how long their tails are, and all of that also has something to do with the way that animism communicates its messages. And maybe you've heard of well witching, where people believe that you can find water by carrying a stick like this, and if you get over a place that has water, it begins to vibrate or move in some way to indicate that there is water below. And there are people that swear by that sort of thing. Then dances at night sometimes to call down judgment or to seek the spirit world, all of these things. And seeking the dead, which of course King Saul did, and he was rebuked for having done so. All of these things have to do with animistic approaches. I'm going to come back to this one in the next lecture, and so hang on and we'll continue and conclude this section on animism.